What's up everyone, NinjaNick333. We are back with round 6, I believe this is, of the European International Championships of the Pokemon trading card game. We've got Sander on the left versus Brian here on the right. Sander always playing some wacky control decks, and we just got a standard Gardevoir list here on the right. So let us get into it here. So let me explain exactly how Sander's deck works, because I had to watch this entire match just to figure out what its win condition is. I went through all of game 1 without finding that out. So the way that Sander wins the game is he sets up a bunch of Curlias in order to dig through his deck, and he has a Mawile that can trap your opponent's active into the active, make it so it can't retreat. Then, while you're still setting up this whole thing, you let your opponent take some prize cards. Eventually you get to a board state where you have an extremely thin deck, and you've whittled away as many of your opponent's resources as possible with things like Crushing Hammer, which just happened to not work in this particular matchup. But you get to a point where you have 2 Penny in deck, and you have 2 Mimikyu V, and Mimikyu V with a Psychic Energy does 3 damage counters for each of your opponent's taken prize cards, and the turn you play it down, it can't take damage. So you put the Mimikyu V down, it can't take damage on your opponent's next turn. You load them up with damage counters, maybe knock out one of their guys. Then on your next turn, you bench another Mimikyu. You penny up the active Mimikyu, reattach that same Psychic Energy to the new Mimikyu, which now has that ability active yet again. And you are able to continuously do that, continue to not be able to take damage while you win the game. So it's meant to take a very long game 1 win and not finish game 2. Because, of course, it's a control deck. So a lot of the ways that Sander draws through his deck to get these control options going will be the Curlias, as well as this Rotom V, which allows you to draw 3 cards end your turn. Brian here ends up starting with a Klefki with the Mischievous Lock that stops basic Pokemon from having abilities. That does not apply to the Forest Sealstone. That still has an ability because it's a tool card, not a Pokemon. So the basic Pokemon can still use that ability of the tool. Klefki is a pretty bad start for Brian, because that is something that can be locked active by that Mawile. But I don't believe that he is aware, even though they're both from, it looks like the Netherlands, I believe, NL. I don't believe that Brian exactly knows what's in Sander's deck. So he does not know how to combat that yet. So a lot of the times when you're playing against a control deck like this, you really just have to figure out what your game plan is for game 2 during game 1. And you're most likely just going to lose along game 1. And you have to use that game 1 to just gain information so that you can tie. And that's just how control matchups work. It's because the time rules are pretty toxic in Pokemon. 50 minutes, best of 3 plus 3 turns. With the current state of the game having so much search, you go through your deck, you know, sometimes 10 times a turn. It just does not give you enough time to finish 3 full games in 50 minutes. So it just lends to a lot more ties, and these control decks really capitalize off of that. Being able to take a surprise game 1 win, and then not being able to lose game 2 by not having enough time left on the clock. Also, if it was best of 1, you would not have ties and go by prize cards, which the control deck would lose by, because it would not have even started taking prize cards, and therefore your opponent would win based off of having taken at least 1. So control decks like this tend to do pretty horribly in the single elimination brackets in the top 8 of these regionals and international championships. Because of that, although Piper Lapine was able to use a version of Sander's Mewtwo V Union deck in order to win a regional in this season, which I was very surprised by just because of how the time rules go. But sometimes you just, you know, can win 2-0. Or win a long game 1 and still have game 2 not finish. But I think you do need to take a certain amount of prize cards as well. I think 4 in order for a game to count in like top 8 in order to go to like a sudden death game 3. It's a little complicated and confusing for some reason, but we still have this Klefki active. We're just going to be continuing to hit with this Joust for 10. I think that at this point here you want to retreat the Klefki into the Gardevoir or into the Kirlia so that it's not threatened to be Mawiled. Especially since you see that Mawile is on the bench now. So yeah, that Mawile's attack does make it so your opponent's active cannot retreat. And then on your next turn, you do 90 additional damage to it. But that part doesn't matter. You're just playing it for the locking the active part. So some other tools that Sander has in his list are, of course, the Crushing Hammers and this Flannery that is now in the discard pile. That are the ways that he runs his opponent out of energy. Of course, that does not work against Gardevoir because the Gardevoir EX can keep putting those energies back into play faster than the Crushing Hammers can flip enough heads to discard them all. And he also has a Crabominable V. So he can, if he, like, say, runs out of pennies, he can do cleanup on maybe a VMAX or something with Crabominable. It does extra damage based off of the damage counters on your opponent's active. So you can load up a bunch of damage counters with Mimikyu, then the next turn penny the Mimikyu back to your hand or retreat it, go into a Crabominable, and then clean up that way. There is also a Manaphy that he plays that is not the bench barrier one. It is one that allows you to look at your opponent's hand and bench some of the basic Pokemon that are in there, a lot like the Capturing Aroma item card that we used to have a few years ago. So you can use that maybe on turn 1 or 2 to put things that your opponent does not want to have in play down, and then try to lock that thing active with the Mawile. Because I do believe Sander should be playing at least one boss's orders. I think I did see that at one point during this match, so. We are using the Forest Seal Stone's V-Star Power of Star Alchemy now to search our deck for a card. Looks like he's eyeing up the Penny. I think he wants to move his Ditto here so that he can go into something a lot more relevant, being that Mawile. So yeah, Penny is probably the star of the deck, I would say. Just being able to continuously put basic Pokemon in your hand. You do have Silene, you have Team Yell's Cheer, and you have Palpad, so you can get a lot of use out of your double pennies. You can pick up all of your Rotom Vs and just leave a couple of Kirlias in play. Maybe your opponent won't be able to take enough prize cards, because then you can start doing the penny loop with the Mimikyu V. Before they're able to get to that. So if they have maybe 3 prize cards left, even if they had a couple bosses orders, you know, they wouldn't be able to do that. So we see the Penny pick up the Ditto. He accidentally puts it in the discard pile, but no, that had to go to his hand. So he fixes that. And we do see the trapping with the Mawile. So that Klefki is now locked active. So again, would have liked to see the retreat on that. Even though Brian is not set up and would prefer to have the Klefki there. The Klefki is shutting off the Rotom, so that does make it so Sander is drawing 3 less cards a turn. But I feel like it would have just been better to have maybe Shining Arcana active, so you could start attacking, even if it wasn't last turn, you know? Because Sander isn't even fully set up yet. He's only got 2 Kirlias, and all he's got is the guy locking your active. He's stalling for time while he digs for all the cards he needs to get the penny loop with Mimikyu. So Brian is just using his refinements here to try to draw some extra cards. I think that one was the Shining Arcana. You can choose to not put Psychic Energies into play. you can just put them into your hand because, of course, those 2 cards you draw are Private Knowledge. And we're just going to keep hitting with Joust. So the thing is, Joust doing 10 you'd think eventually would stack up. But if he gets to like 80 damage on that Mawile, he could always penny that thing back up into maybe a Curlia that he puts a double turbo on and then retreat that back into the Mawile and just keep going. So again, Penny is an extremely strong card that not a lot of people were hyping up before this tournament. We do see one of the Mimikyu V is in hand now. He is playing 2 of those to make the loop a lot easier to go into. He's also got a Radiant Greninja to draw cards with as well, although that is also shut off by the Klefki, so he's likely not going to be able to put that into play right now. Colress's Experiment, just another good card to dig through the deck with. Gonna also own a couple of cards he believes he does not need. I think one of those might be a Crushing Hammer, if I'm remembering correctly. And Sander is just trying to stack up a really big hand, so he has all the options he wants in hand, and his deck can just be, you know, a couple of penny. He is just nest balling to thin, that way, in case he gets, you know, judged, or I guess Roxanne, but I don't think Sander's ever going to take 3 prize cards by the time Roxanne becomes relevant. Can make sure that as few dead cards go back into the deck as possible. So we see Brian is still just digging through, trying to draw into quite literally anything. Some way to get this Klefki out of the active, but the problem is these Gardevoir decks usually do not play switching cards. They don't play Escape Rope, they don't play Switch. They just rely on hard retreating, and that is why Sander built this deck the way it is with this Mawile, because he knows that these Gardevoir decks do not usually play switching cards, so he can just lock them with Tempting Trap, and then what are they going to do? They're just going to sit there and do nothing while you proceed to set up your Mimikyu infinite loop or near infinite loop. So here is Sander just discarding some more cards, drawing some more cards. Not really much else that he needs to do besides just draw cards and pass, but we do see the Peonia here. So a deck like this, any type of control type strategy is going to need to use Peonia. Since you're not going to be taking prize cards either at all or not until the very late end of the game, you want to use Peonia to be able to put cards that are in your prize cards into your hand, and then you can change those out for other cards. So if you prize something super important like the 1 of Water Energy that he plays in case he needs to attack with the Manaphy or the Crabominable, he can potentially pull that out with the Peonia. If he misses the first time, that's okay. He might be playing a second copy, and if not, he's still got Team Yell's Cheer, Silene, and Pal Pad as all ways to put the Peonia back into deck and use it again. So this also allows Sander to know what 3 of his prize cards are, because he took 3 of those prize cards and then immediately puts 3 cards from his hand down as prize cards. He chooses the positioning of where they are, so he is able to potentially put something that he doesn't need right now but could use later in the game. When he is taking prize cards, he can put that in a specific location, remember where it is, and then when he takes that prize card, he can take that specific card back and essentially keep it safe in there from something like a Judge or a Roxanne. And here we go. Here is the Team Yell's Cheer is going to shuffle 3 supporters back into the deck. We see, I believe, the Peonia went back in, the Penny as well, and I think one other one. The camera wasn't on there, so I didn't get to see what his selections were. But I'm pretty sure Peonia and Penny were 2 of the selections, because that would make sense. And again, Brian is still using Refinements and Shining Arcanas, really not doing anything because his Klefki is trapped active. Normally Klefki, very good start for a deck like Gardevoir if they are playing it, because it does shut off Mew VMAX and the Lost Box from being able to do quite literally anything. But unfortunately for you here, it's really your downside, and that is the reason why Brian is not in a very comfortable position right now. We do see the Silene flips 1 heads out of 2. That allows him to put 1 card on top of his deck, which he chooses is the Team Yell's Cheer, of course, because he can then use that to put the Silene back, as well as some other supporters. Make sure that he never decks out and always draws into what he needs. Of course, again, Brian just hitting a 5th time, and we're going to draw even more. So we have that Team Yell's Cheer in hand. We have quite a few different options in our hand. Our hand is, at this point, larger than our deck. We see the V-Guard energy is coming down on the Rotom V. The first time I watched this match, I actually thought that there might have been a Thornton play into the Crabominable because of the way he attaches the V-Guard on here. But he's just doing that just because he can, just so that that's another retreat option if his Mawile gets knocked out, or if he pennies it up and wants to, you know, continue using it. He can put the Rotom active, retreat it. It also helps it in case Brian is able to just pull a really big Zacian V out of nowhere. That's 1 more energy that Brian would need to put into play. So no reason not to attach the V-Guard energy there. So Brian does judge that huge hand back into Sanders' deck, as well as his own big hand back into his own deck. But Sander is just going to start building back up again with these Kirlias. We're going to see Acerola's Premonition, which is kind of funny because I believe it works with the Mimikyu VMAX that the Mimikyu V evolves into. But that's not why he's playing it. He's actually just using it for the hand information. So for those who don't know what Acerola's Premonition is, you look at your opponent's hand and then draw a card for each trainer card that's in there. So really not necessarily using it for the draw, but it draws him just as many cards as the Rotom V would in this situation, since there were 3 cards in there for Brian, I believe. But just using it for the hand knowledge. He wants to know exactly how good his opponent's hand is, what's in there. So no reason not to. And then that's, of course, another card that can just be shuffled back in with Team Yell's Cheer, or put back on top of the deck with Silene, to continue gaining hand information from his opponent, so that then he knows exactly what counter strategies are going to work best if this goes into a game 2 or 3. So here we go. We are going to use the Penny while we have 70 damage on our Mawile. We are going to immediately re-bench it and retreat the Rotom back into the Mawile to continue the lock. And Brian says, I'm done with this. I think that I know how I beat you, and I'd rather just go to game 2 to potentially beat you 2-0 in games 2 and 3. Brian also says he's going to go first. So again, these control decks, you really need to actually spend the time figuring out a game plan against them. I know my friend at a Winnabox that I was just recently at, I was, I think, the only 2-0 in the room somehow, if you can believe it. And I played against him round 3, and I really played for the tie, because he was playing some sort of Kirlia type control deck like this, but it was using Radiant Charizard as the win condition. So you just get to a point where you can bench it, attach Magma Basin to it with a V-Guard energy on it, and then you just start, and a Choice Belt, and just start taking one-shots on things like Lugia V-Star. And I quite literally had no idea what his deck was capable of until the Charizard came down. So I spent all of game 1 just trying to figure out what his card counts were and what exactly he was doing. And then, of course, I very much lost game 1. I said, okay, let's go to game 2. We had completed the game, but game 2, I started Stoutland, and I charged like 3 powerful colorless energies on it, and all that I had was it, the Lugia, and the 2 Archeops in play. And I'm just like, alright, bet. And I just started taking multi-prizes off of the Kirlias before he could get to the turn where he could do that Charizard play. And I managed to win game 2 very swiftly that way. And then game 3, I also started Stoutland, luckily enough. However, it did not work out for me, and on, I believe, turn 2 or 3 at a time, whatever my friend's last turn of time it was, he actually did manage to squeeze out the win. I had Marnied him out of the game, but he managed to just barely draw back into it because he went ahead and used Refinement, Shining Arcana, and then he picked up the Shining Arcana and put it down on the Refinement Kirlia, and then used Shining Arcana one more time to pull the card he needed for the game off of that. He ended up getting the Drizzile so that he could Shady Dealings into the Raihan or something. It was stupid is what it was. So I almost pulled out the tie on that. But that's the way you have to play against control decks like these for Sander. So Brian did mulligan a couple of times, giving Sander a couple extra cards so that he can, get going a little better. But unfortunately, hand not too good there. He does not have too much going on here. Yeah, he's got the Mimikyu way too early. He's just got a double turbo. He's got Cry of Destruction Evital, which is fantastic against something like Lugia V-Star. However, he's not against that. He's against a deck that uses basic Pokemon. That Cry of Destruction discards 3 special energies your opponent has. And, of course, Brian starts the Ralts this time. He has the, as you can see, the Klefki in hand, so he either had it in hand at the beginning and chose not to start it, or just drew that for turn. But you want to start the Ralts. He does actually evolve into Mirage Step Kirlia. He did, unfortunately, draw a little too many. He had, I think, 2 Kirlias in hand, along with that other one that he evolved into, something along those lines. So he did Ultra Ball 1 away to get the Ralts, and then he Mirage Steps to get 1 Refinement Kirlia in play, and he still has another one in hand for that Ralts to evolve into. So honestly, in any position but this, that would be an awful start. You want to be able to Mirage Step 3 Kirlias into play. Mirage Step being an attack that allows you to search your deck for up to 3 Kirlias and put them directly to the bench. Getting to skip the entire Ralts stage, a lot like Froggedier's Water Duplicates. A lot of these Gardevoir decks do not actually even bother playing Mirage Step because Refinement is just so much better of an ability to have than the Mirage Step attack. But it ends up really working out here. He was able to get a Kirlia in play for free. He has 1 Kirlia in hand to be able to evolve. He'll be able to get Shining Arcana out. He could potentially draw 6 cards a turn on turn 3, which is exactly what Gardevoir wants to be able to do. We also see Ursaluna V is coming out this time, so that Sander has something to put this Forest Sealstone onto. But the Ursaluna is played because it takes 30 less damage from attacks with its ability, and you also play the V-Guard energy, so in matchups against V Pokemon, you do end up taking 60 less damage in total with that combination. However, against Gardevoir, does not matter too much because unless they're attacking with Zacian, which Brian is going to elect not to do since he Ultra Balled that away already, he is going to be trying to attack with a Gardevoir EX, which is not affected by V-Guard energy. It's not called EX Guard energy. Or the Shining Arcana Gardevoir, which is just a single prizer. So, looks like we did go for the Crushing Hammer. Must have flipped tails there. And we go ahead and we get this Rotom V out. That instant charge ability will allow Sander to draw 3 cards and end his turn. We get the V-Guard energy as well. Might as well put it to the Ursaluna, because why not? I mean, it's not that great on really anything. Unless you wanted to attach it to the Rotom to have like a retreater. The Ursaluna, I believe, has like a 3 retreat cost or something. That's a pretty chonky boy. But we just see the pass from there. Oh, we used the Forest Seal Stone to get the Stormy Mountain, and used the Stormy Mountain to get the Rotom V. So just clarifying that a little bit here. The Stormy Mountain can also get Regieleki out of the deck. Regieleki being the one that allows you to get a trainer card back from your discard pile. Just another great control option. Sometimes if you are playing a Regi deck, which unfortunately lost way too much in this rotation, it lost Aurora energy, you're not able to really play that deck quite so well anymore. Maybe next format with the new special energy we're getting. But There would always be times in Reggie decks where maybe you don't really have anything going, or you're kind of like in a weird position, or you and your opponent are just kind of like locking each other out of the game, and you can just go in with the Regieleki and just like stack ordinary rods back into your hand, or just get a research out so that you stop bricking, etc. Things like that. The Regieleki is just really good to have. He won't be using the other attack that bench snipes 120 in this deck because he's not playing any lightning energy. Just playing, I believe, a couple of Psychics, 1 Water, and then the V-Guard, and multiple double turbos because the Kirlias have 2 retreat costs. So might as well put those down on Kirlias so that you have a way to retreat. Also has that Radiant Greninja, you can just discard those double turbos if you have too many of those in your hand anyway. So, Brian is getting fully set up now. We've got 2 Kirlia on the bench, as well as the Psychic Embrace Gardevoir EX in the active. And this is perfect because Gardevoir is able to charge itself up fully and is able to knock out Sanders' active Pokemon. So over the course of these 2 games, we're quite literally halfway through the timer at 25 minutes right now. We have finally seen the first prize card of this match be taken. It's so funny, Sander won game 1, but neither of them took a prize during game 1. So we do see the Peonia come out here. We're going to grab 3 cards off of our prize cards, and we are going to replace 3 cards from our hands into our prize cards. So Sander's going to know where exactly those 3 cards are that he put it back in. Hopefully putting the 3 most useless cards from his hand into there. We are also going to bench this Greninja, use concealed cards, discarding the Psychic Energy to draw 2. And we get a level ball off of that, so we are going to be able to start setting up some Ralts to be able to turn into Kirlias to have even more refinements. So it's, honestly, in my opinion, a little perplexing that Pokemon keeps printing cards with Zoroark GX's trade ability, essentially, which is what refinement is. Because it was just such a ridiculously overpowered and broken ability at the time. And now they just seem to be printing it on everything. It was on Minccino, or it was on Cinccino, which just rotated. They put it on a Thievul, and now they have it on Kirlia. And then the Shining Arcana ability as well lets you draw 2 cards, but that's a stage 2, so that's a lot more fair. But it's just like mystifying that they keep just letting us have that ability forever, it seems. Although, of course, the best thing about Zoroark GX was also that it had the same attack as Raikou V, basically, so... but also had the discard draw 2 effect, so... At least they're not making these guys good attackers. I'll say that at least. We are going to use Fog Crystal, get out another Psychic Energy, just to hard attach it to the bench. He's going to start stacking up energies to this bench Kirlia so that he has an undamaged Gardevoir that he can stack a bunch of damage on to potentially take a one-shot on the Ursaluna or anything else that comes up. And we see the boss's orders being able to bring up that Rotom V and hit it for exact 190 knockout. So Brian's already taken 3 prize cards. And now Sander's really on the back foot here because he's just going to have to sit behind this Ursaluna and still doesn't have a single Gardevoir, Kirlia in play at all. We're going to go for potentially a Nest Ball. We're thinking about it. We could always get another Ralts. We could get the Mimikyu, although then the ability wouldn't activate because I think you have to bench it. I'm not sure. I should clarify that. Let me look. Mimikyu V. Dummy Doll ability says, yeah, when you play it from your hand onto the bench. So it looks like we're gonna get a Ditto just because, then our deck from it. Get it out of there. In case one of those Ralts go down, you could always transform the Ditto into the Ralts. The Ditto keeps the amount of turns that it has in play. So if next turn one of the Ralts goes down, you could transform the Ditto into Ralts, and then immediately evolve it into Kirlia, because the Ditto was in play the previous turn. Now, Ursaluna, because it takes 30 less and has 200 and, I want to say 30 HP, that Gardevoir will be two-shotting it no matter what. So that gives Sander a couple more turns to try to find a way around this Gardevoir. But I think the big downside to Sander's deck here in the Gardevoir matchup is that it does not play Path to the Peak. So it has all of those Crushing Hammers, but Gardevoir can always put its energy right back onto itself here. So it's forcing Sander to be really aggressive here. Even though Brian has only taken 3 prize cards, Sander is trying to already set up the Mimikyu play. So he's just searched his deck for that, and it's in his hand. And we're going to see him try to start attacking, potentially. It'll depend on if he can get to that this turn. Looks like he is forced to bench another Rotom V, which is another good boss's orders target if Brian's able to dig into that. But yeah, if Brian could get that this next turn, that basically wins him the game, because he'll go down to 1 prize remaining. And then even if he fights his way through an Ursaluna, I mean, it doesn't matter how many turns it takes, he'll eventually be able to take a single prize. Brian can just, like, put 2 Gardevoirs in play on top of his Kirlias, just stack a bunch of energy onto both of them so that they're all set up and ready to go. If any Crushing Hammers come out, the Gardevoir EX just puts those energies back. And then it would essentially be a checkmate position to where Sander would just want to scoop to save time and go straight to Game 3 to see if Game 3 can finish. So I am very concerned for Sander in this position because of that Rotom V, but you gotta do what you gotta do to draw more cards sometimes. He only got that 1 Kirlia. He wasn't able to evolve that other Ralts, so still needs to dig through his deck to establish the Mimikyu lock here. So we see the Sky Seal Stone come onto the Gardevoir EX. That does not matter because it does not work on Gardevoir EX since it's not a basic Pokemon V. And it does not work against Ursaluna V or Rotom V because neither of them are a VMAX or a V-Star. You can always attach the Sky Seal Stone to any Pokemon, use the V-Star power, but the Pokemon that you attack with does have to be a basic V. I had an opponent at a regional make that mistake. I believe they, forgot what they put it on. They put it on a Drapion, used the ability, but then they attacked with a Snorlax. And I said, you do not get your additional prize on my Lugia, sir. So we are going to discard Rare Candy, Refinement some more, attach another energy from hand. We do have a couple of more Gardevoirs in hand. We could always just evolve them now. Or you could wait so that you have more refinements to try to dig into what you want. The thing is, Brian is most likely going to be forced to go through this Ursaluna. So he has 2 turns to draw into a second boss's orders to be able to just straight up win the game. He should know that that Mimikyu is coming because that Mimikyu was searched and revealed in the hand. So, since he knows his opponent is playing Penny, and he knows his opponent is playing Mimikyu V, he should have enough information to be able to piece together what Sander's deck exactly does with the Mimikyu loop. So, I might hold off on evolving, although if you evolve into a Shining Arcana, it doesn't quite matter, because you're still drawing 2 cards either way. But you could always, like, the turn you need the boss's orders, you could always Refinement and then Shining Arcana with the same Pokemon. So, that gets you a little bit more value in that way. Yeah, so that Sky Seal Stone was just put down so that when Brian judged there, he didn't have that go back into his deck to be a dead draw. And of course, Sander, having been judged on that previous turn, is really trying to figure out exactly how he can put his hand back together. So Ursaluna now has 160 damage on it because he took 190 minus 30 for the hard coat ability. And it is 1 more attack from that Gardevoir away from being knocked out. And then after that, that is one more knockout of any of Sanders' Pokemon that are currently in play for Gardevoir to be able to win the game. We do see there's an Ultra Ball and the Shining Arcana Gardevoir in hand. I think if I remember correctly, Brian did discard a Shining Arcana Gardevoir earlier. So the one that's in hand might be the only one available to him. So he might have to Ultra Ball for an EX if he still has one of those as well. We are going to see a level ball to get that Kirlia that we've been looking for all game. If we have it, looks like we don't. That's a little rough. Makes me wonder what his Kirlia line is. I would assume like 3-3. Oh, he already had it in hand. He was just looking through to make sure there wasn't anything else he could thin. Like if he had the Manaphy in there. Because in this game, it's a little too late to be using the Manaphy. Although that Acerola's Premonition did give him the information that Brian does have a basic Pokemon in his hand that he could lock with a with the Mawile. But I think at this point, Sanders just way too far behind. He has way too many Pokemon on his bench. He's not going to be able to set up a play like that. He does not even have the penny to be able to recycle that Ursaluna, which would have been great. He would have been able to pick up the Ursaluna, promote the Kirlia that has the double turbo attached to it, and then retreat back into the Ursaluna to be able to take another hit, thus saving himself one more turn. But you'd lose a penny in that way. You really want to be saving those pennies for the Mimikyu. So we are seeing Brian discard, draw 2. We're getting rid of the Shining Arcana. Got a Fog Crystal for an energy, probably just to discard that so that we have more in the discard. Either that or we can hard attach to that Kirlia that already has the 2 on it on the bench. Okay, so he just discarded the first Shining Arcana. He has the other one in hand now. He doesn't think he needs both. Although I would have kept it personally, because you know that you're going to be digging for a boss's orders on this turn. So maximize the ability to draw through your deck to get to it. Or at least get to the PAL pad that will increase the odds to get to it. Looks like Brian's last prize is also Shining Arcana as well. So he is down 1, has 1 in hand, and the other one is prize. So that is the only one he's working with right now, unless he wants to Clara it back. And we finally see the Mimikyu does come out. His active Pokemon, the Rotom, was pennied, so that's no longer a prize liability on the bench. Pennies it into his hand to promote the Mimikyu V, attaches a Psychic Energy and uses Jealous Eyes to put 3 damage counters for each prize your opponent has taken, so that's 150 total damage worth. Yeah, 150. It's 15 damage counters because of 5 prizes. And because of Dummy Doll's ability, since the Mimikyu was benched from hand to this turn, it will not be able to take any damage from your opponent's attacks. At least on this turn. It will on the next turn, which is why Sander wants to dig for another penny and another Mimikyu if he doesn't have those already. It looks like I do see the penny in hand, so he's going to have to dig for his other Mimikyu. But even if he doesn't get the other Mimikyu, he can always penny the active one, and then promote the Kirlia, and then bench the Mimikyu, retreat back into it, attach the Psychic again, and do the attack again, and then still be free from being able to be knocked out. So now you're finally able to see exactly how Sanders' deck works. It's just the problem is he wanted to be able to get to the Mimikyu game 1. He wanted game 1 to last longer. Brian scooped early as soon as he knew that there was no out to winning, and as soon as he felt comfortable enough with learning enough information to be able to come back in game 2 And you could see just that. Brian has only benched the amount of Pokemon that he felt that he needed. Just enough Kirlias to be able to draw through his deck to get cards that he needed when he needed them. Was able to start attacking with the Gardevoir that is Crushing Hammer proof. That does exactly enough damage to knock out Rotoms and any of the single prize Pokemon as well. So Brian's played this excellently. And you can see how much he's learned from game 1 in order to combat this deck, and why I don't like control decks. I would hate playing control at a big tournament like this. It takes so much thinking and so much time. I just hate going to time. I'd rather play something fast and aggressive. Looks like we do get the other Mimikyu here off of that last, let's see, it looks like concealed cards. Now we penny, put up the other Mimikyu, attach for turn, Palpad in, double penny. And the strategy has finally been established. However, is it too late? Because Brian is one boss's orders away from being able to win the game. If Brian's last prize, per se, was the boss's orders, then there is a world where Sander could win. But I think that Brian's deck is too thin. He knows he has the boss's orders in there. So it's just a matter of, will he draw it on this turn or not? Sander is also thinning as many cards out of his hand as possible by playing those double level balls. Those aren't needed anymore, so if Brian does miss the boss and go for a judge instead, at least Sander will not have those cards left in deck. We do see the Mawile is prize, so that strategy of using Manaphy and then the Mawile to get that Klefki out of the hand after he learned it was in there by using Acerolas Premonition earlier in this game wasn't even an option. Unless he was able to get the Hisuian Heavy Ball or the Peonia again. But he did not really have too many free turns. He's always been just digging super hard to try to establish this lock. And because it's only Gardevoirs in play, he just was not able to get there yet. But of course, Sander has now taken 2 prize cards. And there's only 2 Pokemon left in play for Brian, so if he does not get this boss's orders now, he's really struggling here. So this is a cool play that Brian goes for. There are 2 energy on this active Gardevoir right now, and he knows that the Mimikyu is doing enough damage counters to be able to one-shot the Gardevoir, and that boss's orders is already down in Sander's discard pile, I want to say. So he's going to attach and retreat his Gardevoir, and then put up the Ralts so that there's just a single prize Pokemon that isn't Kirlia or Gardevoir in play, so that he has 1 more turn to draw into the boss's orders. So here we go. Sander is likely going to go for the penny play again. I believe he top decked that. I think his deck was like 3 cards, and the Palpad shuffled 2 pennies back in, so it was, 2/3 odds that he was going to draw that for turn. And of course, he's just playing the Forest Seal Stone down, so it's not in his hand. I think that if I were him, I would just put it onto like the Miltank or the Kirlia or something, so I don't have to keep picking it up. But just plays a Stadium, and there is the boss's orders drawn for turn, so he evolves into the Psychic Embrace. Gardevoir EX plays the boss's orders. Sander knows that he's lost now, so he's going to scoop up and go to game 3. So, yeah, that is how Gardevoir beats this deck. I think Gardevoir probably has the best matchup against it out of all the current meta decks, just because of the Psychic Embrace. So I'm surprised that I really am surprised that there's not, like, a couple Path to the Peak in Sander's deck or something like that to try to combat that. Make the Crushing Hammers have some actual value. Or maybe he just thought Gardevoir wasn't a good enough deck, so he tried not to directly counter that, and thought if I do have to hit it, then maybe the Manaphy Mawile combo will be enough to get me there. Which, it, to be fair, did get him there game 1. He was able to just Mawile, like 15 turns in a row or something ridiculous like that, and was able to get there just because Brian started Klefki. So they are just still shuffling up. They're taking quite a lot of time to shuffle up, and I think that's because both players are fairly aware of how much time is left on the clock, and they know, yeah, this is most likely going to tie. So why rush playing out game 3? We'll just try to play it out to see if one of us bricks and go from there. So we have 2 Psychic Energies, 2 ways to get Psychic Energies, and 2 Gardevoir line pieces in the prize cards, which is kind of funny for Brian. Looks like we are going to decide what we're starting here. I do believe that that is the Manaphy. This is the game where the Manaphy is actually shown here. I'm surprised they're not making Sander spread out his prize cards correctly. But, I mean, we can see them all, so what does it matter? And we are going in, so Sander should be going first. Yep, he did start the Manaphy, so that is the card that allows him to look at his opponent's hand and put basic Pokemon onto his bench. Also gets Greninja, Ralts, Rotom V, and then uses Rotom V. So he's drawn 5 extra cards this turn because he did use concealed cards, discarding the V-Guard energy, and was able to get a pretty decent setup. Usually Sander only needs those 2 Kirlia in play. Maybe he's only playing a 2-2 line. It's entirely possible, but I would assume 3-3 is more safe. He's only ever gotten 2 in play in either of the previous games. That's probably his sweet spot. That's all he really feels he needs. We are going to see Brian get 3 Ralts into play by using a Battle VIP Pass after starting a Ralts. Then uses Teleport to hit the Manaphy for 10. Not that that matters. So we're going to have to see if Sander is able to go for the Manaphy play, but if we remember what his prize cards were, he did prize the one and only water energy that he has, so he will not be able to put Brian's Klefki from hand onto bench and go for the Mawile play. And even if he was able to do that, there are only 4.5 minutes left on the clock. And with how long those other 2 games went, we finished game 2 at exactly 8 minutes left. So that was, what, 42 minutes for 2 games? So that's an average of 21 minutes per game, which is really fast in all honesty. Games finishing in 21 minutes are pretty average, average to good, I would say. Because games usually, in my opinion, take about 25 minutes to complete most of the time. If you're playing against a player who's playing at I'll call it normal pace, not the competitive pace that you need to be playing at these tournaments. We are going to use our Forest Seal Stone here. Sander at this point already knows that he has that water energy prize, so he's not going for that. He went for something else. I don't remember what he went for, though. Oh, I think he went for a Kirlia. And now he is using Level Ball to get Pyukumuku. Now, Pyukumuku is a card that Sander loves including in all of his control decks. It has the ability pitch a Pyukumuku where once per turn, if it's in your hand, you can put it on bottom and draw a card. So it just turns that Level Ball into a draw one. It basically turned Level Ball into almost a Trekking Shoes. We are going to use Colress's Experiment as well. We're going to look at the top 5, Lost Zone 2, keep the other 3. The Lost Zoning 2, I mean the Lost Zone count doesn't matter, but thinning the deck of cards that you don't want in the matchup is potentially good, so you could always Lost Zone something along the lines of a Crushing Hammer, since that does not really do too much good for you. And we do see the Hisuian Heavy Ball here as well. He's going to be able to look at his prize cards. There's that water energy. We are going to take the Miltank. Miltank not really doing anything, does not stop anything that's in Brian's deck besides the Zacian V, which, if Brian has anything to say about it, will not be being put in play. Here is a Crushing Hammer, flips tails of course, so we will not see that Psychic Energy get discarded to the discard pile, which is where discarded cards go. Fun fact. I don't know why I said it like that. And we go right into Brian's turn with that instant charge drawn 3. So Brian does level ball to get a Curlia. We are going to be able to go back in, go immediately with the Fog Crystal here to get a Psychic Energy, trying to make these actions go as fast as possible, but then of course then immediately goes and shuffles his deck forever. So now we will be able to use Refinement to discarding that Psychic Energy. That's where we want it, is in the discard pile, and trying to find some other cards that we can use. We get Judge off of that Refinement, so we're going to play it to try to limit what Sander can do on his next turn. Since Sander is drawing so many cards, he was able to draw 5 cards on the last turn by putting your opponent's hand at 4 or 5 after their draw for turn. I mean, he effectively got rid of half of Sander's hand. It's also funny seeing a deck that plays Pot Helmet too, because that's in there. Do see the Refinement is going to get rid of a Forest Seal Stone. And here is a Nest Ball, potentially just playing that to fail it. No, looks like we're going to go for the Regieleki. So that Regieleki, again, is the one with the electromagnetic sonar that allows you to get a trainer card from your discard pile and put it into your hand. Costs 1 energy to do that, 1 colorless energy, so you can do that with anything. Using our second Refinement here, we could also discard the Double Turbo if we want to use concealed cards. It looks like we're going to use Zinnia instead, discarding Team Yell, Cheer, and Flannery to draw 1 card for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play. Now we have 3 Double Turbos in hand, so he's considering using the Radiant Greninja here. Opts not to do it. I would have liked to see maybe an attach of one to one of the Curlias at the very least, but that way it could retreat. And at that point, the time is called, and both players know that there's no way they can take 3 prize cards within their +3 turns that they have remaining. So they know this game isn't going to finish, so it's a guaranteed tie, and I'm sure both players are a little thankful for that, because Sander knows that Brian has the same sort of setup as he did in Game 2 where he won. And I'm sure Brian, yeah, so that's why Sander's happy with it and Brian's happy with it, because he just faced against some crazy control deck, was able to masterfully play Game 2 in such a way to where this was not a loss. So, really great game, really skilled game. And it just goes to show the type of innovation that you can have in Pokemon by being able to play such a deck like Sander's. Sander is always coming up with crazy control strategies that you have not seen before to every event he goes to. Sometimes it ends up working out, sometimes it does not work out so much. So thanks everybody for watching. Do not forget to comment, like, and subscribe to feed that YouTube algorithm, make the channel keep growing, keep these videos being pushed out to other people so that I can keep making cool videos like this going forward. And we will see you guys next time. Man, I need some water. Holy crap, I talked a lot.